In this module, we are going to talk about the psychology behind cults and certain types of extremism. We have all heard the term cult, and we typically associate it with the word crazy. We think about the people who were once ordinary citizens and have since been persuaded by a group leader to carry out unspeakable acts, including murder, suicide, and other violent acts. One definition of a cult is any group which employs mind control and deceptive recruiting techniques. In other words, a group that tricks people into joining and coercing them to stay. However, Margaret Singer and Janja Lalick, who have worked with more than 3,000 cult members in their careers, defines it a little bit differently. Margaret Singer prefers the term cultic relationship because it is more precise and signifies the processes and interactions that go on in a cult. Her label refers to three factors. First, the origin of the group and role of the group leader. Second, the power structure, or the relationship between the leader and followers. Third, it focuses on the use of a coordinated program of persuasion, which is called thought reform, or more commonly, brainwashing. It is important to note that one researcher may label a group a cult, whereas another researcher won't. For example, some researchers count only religion-based groups, which discounts the array of cults formed by a variety of doctrines and beliefs. According to Singer and Lalick, using the three factors allows researchers to assess the cultic nature of a particular group or situation regardless of its belief system. So why aren't all organized groups considered cults? Well, Singer and Lalick state a cultic relationship is one in which a person intentionally induces others to become totally or nearly totally dependent on him or her for almost all major life decisions, and inculcates in these followers a belief that he or she has some special talent, gift, or knowledge. So let's expand on the three factors of Singer and Lalick's definition. Origin of the group and role of the leader. In most cases, there is one person, typically the founder, at the top of the cult's structure, and decision-making centers in him or her. There are some female cult leaders, but most are male, so for simplicity, we'll refer to them as male. These leaders typically have the following characteristics. Cult leaders are self-appointed, persuasive persons who claim to have a special mission in life or to have special knowledge. For example, leaders of flying saucer cults often claim that beings from outer space have commissioned them to lead people to special places to await a spaceship. Other leaders claim to have rediscovered ancient ways to produce enlightenment or cure disease, while yet others claim to have developed inventive scientific, humanistic, or social plans that will lead followers to new levels of awareness, success, or personal and political power. The second way they are alike is that cult leaders tend to be determined and domineering and are often described as charismatic. These leaders need to have enough personal drive, charm, or other appeal to attract, control, and manage their flocks. They persuade devotees to drop their families, jobs, careers, and friends to follow them. Overtly or covertly, in most cases, they eventually take over control of their followers' possessions, money, and lives. Third, cult leaders center veneration on themselves. Ethical priests, rabbis, ministers, democratic leaders, and leaders of genuinely altruistic movements keep the veneration of adherents focused on God, abstract principles, or the group's purpose. Cult leaders, in contrast, keep the focus of love, devotion, and allegiance on themselves. In many cults, for example, spouses are forced to separate or parents forced to give up their children as a test of their devotion to the leader. For a simple visual portrayal, imagine an inverted T. The leader is alone at the top, and the followers are all at the bottom, with sometimes a string of lieutenants to help maintain the status quo. Cults are authoritarian in structure. The leader is regarded as the supreme authority, although he may delegate certain power to a few subordinates for the purpose of seeing that members adhere to the leader's wishes and rules. There is no appeal outside of the leader's system to greater systems of justice. For example, if a school teacher feels unjustly treated by a principal, appeals can be made to a higher authority within that school system. In a cult, the leader has the only and final ruling on all matters. Cults appear to be innovative and exclusive. Cult leaders claim to be breaking with tradition, offering something novel, and instituting the only viable system for change that will solve life's problems or the world's ills. For example, an Arizona-based group purported to have found immortality and tells its followers that they too will live forever, but only by staying with the leaders, known by the initials of their first names, CBJ, Chuck, Bernadine, and Jim. At one time, CBJ reportedly had 30,000 followers worldwide. Meanwhile, another group professed that by living with the group and learning a secret breathing method, members will eventually be able to live on air alone. Almost all cults make the claim that their members are chosen, selected, and special, while non-members are considered lesser beings. Cults tend to have a double set of ethics. Members are urged to be open and honest within the group and to confess all to the leaders. At the same time, members might be encouraged to deceive and manipulate outsiders or non-members. In contrast, established religions teach members to be honest and truthful to all and to abide by one set of ethics. The overriding philosophy in cults, however, is that the end justifies the mean, a view that allows cults to establish their own brand of morality, one that often is outside society's norms. For example, one large group introduced the concept of heavenly deception. Another introduced transcendental trickery. And some of the neo-Christian groups introduced terms such as talking to the Babylonians, or refer to outsiders as the systemites. Language such as this is meant to justify a double set of ethics, making it acceptable to deceive non-members. There are certain general characteristics that are a crucial factor in the definition of cults. And that is that cults tend to be totalistic, or all-encompassing, in controlling their members' behavior, and also ideologically totalistic, exhibiting zealotry and extremism in their worldview. Eventually, and usually sooner rather than later, most cults expect members to devote increasing time, energy, and money or other resources to the professed goals of the group, stating or implying that a total commitment is required to reach enlightenment. The form of that commitment will vary from group to group. More courses, more meditation, more quotas, more cult-related activities, more donations, and so on. Some cults have been known to dictate what members wear and eat, when and where they work, sleep, and bathe, as well as what to believe, think, and say. On most matters, cults promote what we call black and white thinking, or an all or nothing point of view. Cults also tend to require members to undergo a major disruption or change in lifestyle. Many cults put great pressure on new members to leave their families, friends, and jobs to become immersed in the group's major purpose. This isolation tactic is one of the most common mechanisms of control and enforced dependency used by cults. Let's talk about some common misconceptions about cults before we move on. One of the biggest misconceptions are that they are easy to spot because they wear strange clothes or live in a commune. While this may be true for some cults, most cult members are just normal people like you and me who are living their everyday lives. They live in houses and wear the similar clothes, they eat similar food. Cult leaders don't want you to know that you are being recruited into a cult, so they order recruiters to dress, talk, and act in a way that will put you at ease. The second misconception is that people who join cults go out looking for a cult. This is typically not the case, as the act of joining a cult results from a process put in motion by a cult recruiter or the cult leader. The seeker theory makes it seem like there is a storefront with a sign out front that reads, "Join a cult today," and people just walk in and ask to join. That's just not how it works, and we'll talk a little bit more about the process later. The third misconception is that all of the members are weak, weird, and emotionally unstable people. It is human nature to think that no one could ever do that to me when we hear about people getting scammed or being influenced by others. We like to think that our opinions, values, and ideas are protected and completely self-regulated. We may acknowledge that the media can influence just a little bit, but other than that, we tend to consider other people weak-minded and easily influenced, while we are the strong ones. But as history tells us time and time again, we are all susceptible to the influences around us, just as cult members are. Many cult members are very intelligent, attractive, and skilled people. The reality is that all sorts of people are involved in cults. One of the few common denominators is that members were often recruited at a sensitive period in their life. So who joins and why? The majority of adolescents and adults in cults come from middle-class backgrounds, are fairly well educated, and are not psychologically disturbed prior to joining. Research indicates that approximately 2/3 of those who have joined cults came from normal, functioning families and demonstrated age-appropriate behavior around the time they entered the cult. Of the remaining third, only about 5 to 6% had major psychological difficulties prior to joining the cult. The remaining portion of the third had diagnosable depressions related to personal loss. For example, a death in the family, failure to be admitted to a preferred university, or a broken romance. Or they might have been struggling with age-related sexual or career dilemmas. Certain family backgrounds may render some young people more vulnerable than others to the lure of a cult. Cults offer instant, simplistic, and focused solutions to life's problems. Some families unwittingly foster a combination of indecisiveness and rebelliousness that makes the cult seem like a perfect solution to a young person seeking escape from the frustration of the family situation. In such families, children are often constantly encouraged to be adventurous, be activists, be independent, go against the grain, buck the system. Yet whenever the offspring become active, or choose an affiliation or rebel in some way, they are berated by the same parents for choosing the wrong activity or friends, doing the wrong thing, or making the wrong decision. Pushing their children too much and too quickly to grow up and be adult, parents tend to be less than helpful to these young people facing a variety of decisions. The children feel left to their own devices, and at the same time lack confidence in their own decision-making abilities. A number of cult members are found to come from such family backgrounds. Another kind of vulnerability, or stress factor, evolves when a person, especially an adolescent or a young adult, feels overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices that need to be made. The ambiguity of life at this age, the complexity of the world, and the amount of conflict associated with many aspects of daily life. In addition to facing many pressing personal decisions, many adolescents are attempting to come to grips with their overall values, beliefs, and purpose in life. Many former cult members report that certain classes they took late in high school or early in college contributed greatly to their bewilderment. They commonly describe classes, teachers, and experiences that they felt destabilized their views of the world, leaving them frightened by the complexity of making seemingly endless decisions. Feeling lost and alone, they felt the need to find affiliation in some simple ways to make their life work. Without intending to make such a choice, they found themselves swept along into a group that offered simple and guaranteed paths to follow. Something similar happens to adult joiners. Many adults today are overwhelmed by the confusion and apparent coldness of our society. The senseless violence, the rampant homelessness, the lack of meaning, widespread loss of respect for authority figures or for other humans in general, the vast numbers of unemployed and marginalized, the insecurity and instability of the job market, the loss of family communication, the lessening role of the established religions, the failing sense of community or even neighborhood. No less bewildered than the adolescents, many mature adults are finding less and less to hold on to in today's technoculture. What does this create but ripe recruits for the multitude of manipulators and swindlers out there? Nevertheless, the fact remains that apart from unsettling socioeconomic conditions and certain relevant family factors, any person who is in a vulnerable state, seeking companionship and a sense of meaning, in a period of transition or a time of loss, is a good prospect for cult recruitment. Although most contemporary cults primarily recruit young adults, preferably single, some especially the neo-Christian cults seek entire families, and even the elderly are targets of some groups. What do these cults offer to lonely, depressed, or uncertain persons? In one form or another, each cult purports to offer an improved state of mind, an expanded state of being, and a moral, spiritual, or political state of righteous certainty. That supposedly beneficial state can be reached only by following the narrowly prescribed pathways of a particular group master, guru, or trainer. To grasp that approach to life, the new recruit, the babe, the preemie, the trial member, the spiritual godchild, whatever the certain groups labels the beginner, must surrender his or her critical mind, must yield to the flow of force, and must have childlike trust and faith. This is a quote from a 1990 article on indoctrination by Hockman, which describes it quite nicely. Cults promise salvation. Instead of boredom, noble and sweeping goals. Instead of existential anxiety, structure and certainty. Instead of alienation, community. Instead of impotence, solidarity directed by all-knowing leaders. Let's talk about some of the different types of cults. One of the most popular types are religious cults. These groups use a belief system as their base and typically deviate from or distort the fundamental teachings of a traditional religion, such as Christianity, Hinduism, or Islam. In addition, they are likely to add their own rules, rituals, or ceremonies, and some have even added their own works of righteousness. When the basis is Christianity, the cult will most likely say that Jesus' sacrifice is sufficient for salvation, but add that their version of the word must be added in order to grant true salvation. or guarantee salvation. Groups that have done this and added their own works include the Mormons, who added the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. Christian Science has added the book Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, and Jehovah's Witness has changed the text of the Bible altogether to make it congruent with their message. Another type of cult is a political cult. These groups tend to be on the political fringe and advocate for the far left or the far right agendas. Some have even argued that the Tea Party currently operates as a cult. Another major type of cult is a commercial cult, or a group that has a financial goal. They are typically concerned with greed and also try to appeal to the greed of its followers. Sometimes these groups market themselves as religions, and you have to work for free and require you to buy all their materials. They typically operate on a non-sustainable business model that involves promising participants payment for services, primarily for enrolling other people into the scheme, rather than supplying any real investment or sale of products or services to the public. Today, the fastest growing cultic groups competing with the religious cults are those centered around New Age thinking and personal improvement. In the United States, there are at least 10 major types of cults, each with its own beliefs, practices, and social mores. This is a list of the top 10 in the United States. Cult names suggest further groupings and emphasis. Some start their names with "the," implying that theirs is the only way to be, to think, or to live. Examples include the True Believers, the Way, the Walk, the Process, the Foundation, the Body, the Farm, and the Assembly. Other groups emphasize the concept of family, the family, the Love family, the family of love, the Rainbow family, the Manson family, the Christ family. Images of siblings provide other family models, such as Brother Julius, Brother Evangelist, Brother David, and countless other brotherhoods, and sometimes sisterhoods. Many groups are designated simply as churches or temples: the People's Temple, the Church of Armageddon, with such variations as the Word of or the People of, and sometimes using Bible in their name. New Age and psychotherapy groups take names such as the Center for Feeling Therapy, the Sullivanians, Alive Polarity Fellowship, Direct Centering, Sun Arts, and Silva Mind Control. There is a plethora of Eastern-based groups whose names are often formed around the name of the guru or mission. Both personal and other kinds of names abound in groups representing a variety of philosophies: Alamo Christian Foundation, Bubba Free John and the Dawn Horse Communion, Kashi Ranch, Blue White Dove Foundation, and the No Name Group. This listing could go on and on, exposing the sheer numbers and scope of the cults around us. Yet on one level, all cults use a variation on a single theme, and in a sense, that theme has nothing to do with belief. In cultic groups, the belief system, whether religious, psychotherapeutic, political, New Age, or commercial, ends up being a tool to serve the leader's desires, whims, and hidden agendas. The ideology is a double-edged sword. It is the glue that binds the member to the group, and it is a tool exploited by the leader to achieve his goals. To understand cults, we must examine structure and practice, not beliefs. Let's look at some of the most infamous cults. In 1978, Reverend Jim Jones and 900 followers, including children, committed suicide in Jonestown by drinking cyanide-laced punch. In 1991, a Mexican minister and 29 followers suffocate after he instructs them to keep praying, and ignore toxic fumes filling the church. In 1993, at least 80 Branch Davidians, followers of David Koresh, perished in a fire and shootout with the BATF at their compound in Waco, Texas. Also in 1993, 53 Vietnamese tribal villagers commit suicide with primitive weapons in the belief that they will go straight to heaven. 1994, 67 members of the Order of the Solar Temple cult are found burned to death in the French Alps in Switzerland and in Quebec, Canada. And in 1995, they released sarin gas in 5 Tokyo subway stations, killing 12 people, one dying a year after the attack, and sickened more than 5,500 others. In 1997, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult, led by Marshall Applewhite, committed suicide in California. They died so they can join the mothership following the Hale-Bopp comet. In 2000, more than 900 members of a reclusive Christian doomsday cult in Africa were murdered by their leaders. Many burned to death, and others were buried in mass graves. In 2003, members of the Raelians, a cult founded by Claude Vorilhon, also known as Rael, claimed that with the assistance of Clonade, a human cloning company, they had cloned 2 or more infants. Let's take a closer look at the People's Temple, which was led by Jim Jones. People's Temple was a religious community led by Jones that came to international attention after some 900 of its members died at their compound in Jonestown in Guyana in a massive act of murder-suicide on November 18, 1978. Jones began the People's Temple informally in the 1950s as an independent congregation in Indianapolis. He was inspired by the ideal of a just society that could overcome the evils of racism and poverty. Although Jones was white, he attracted mostly African Americans to the group, with his vision of an integrated congregation. In 1960, the People's Temple affiliated with the Christian Church, also known as Disciples of Christ, and 4 years later, Jones was ordained. In 1965, he warned of a nuclear holocaust and led the movement to California, where members became active in both Protestant ecumenical circles and state politics. Branch congregations opened in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and the agricultural settlement Jonestown was founded in 1974. Jones's apostolic socialism was influenced by the Marxist liberation theology, popular among Latin American clergy at the time. He mixed social concerns with faith healing and an enthusiastic worship style drawn from the Black church. He also invited members to live communally in an effort to realize his utopian ideal. Meanwhile, the church was accused in the press of financial fraud, physical mistreatment of members, and abuse of children in its care. In 1977, Jones led hundreds of the group's members to Guyana. There is a fascinating documentary on the evolution of this cult, including those final days. If you're interested, it's easily accessible through YouTube. On March 26, 1997, people were found dead in a house on a hilltop in San Diego, California. The people were members of a cult and were part of a carefully orchestrated suicide that involved sedatives, vodka, and plastic bags. There were 21 women and 18 men, and they had come to California from across the country. Most of the victims were in their 40s, but ages ranged from 26 to 72. The name of the cult was Heaven's Gate, and it also operated a computer web service called Higher Source. The victims evidently believed that they were going to meet a UFO hiding behind the comet Hale-Bopp, and the suicides occurred during the time that the comet was closest to Earth. The suicide probably took place over 3 days and seemed to have been calm and ritualistic. One group of cult members apparently helped some other members die, cleaned up after them, and then went on to take their own doses of poison, which was mixed with applesauce or pudding. The last two victims had plastic bags over their heads. The victims all wore black pants and black Nike sports shoes, and their faces and chests were covered in purple shrouds. The victims had carefully packed their bags and placed their few possessions at their sides. Most of the victims had a $5 bill and some quarters in their pockets. There was no blood found at the scene, and the only weapon in the home was a 9mm pistol packed in a bag. Creativity is a new religious movement based in Illinois that was founded by Ben Klassen in 1973. Klassen designed creativity to unite white people through a common, racist, cultural, and political organization. Creativity gained national attention in the United States when Benjamin Nathaniel Smith resigned his church membership and went on a racially motivated shooting spree. His actions may have also been motivated by the denial of creativity leader Matthew F. Hale's license to practice law in Illinois due to his beliefs. So how does someone create their own cult? By no means am I advocating for you to start a cult, but merely presenting this to you as another way of looking at it. The first step is to find something people already believe in and put your own spin on it. Then you eliminate all sources of information except the information that is provided by you. You can do this by being in a remote area, having no media access, and limiting contact to outside people. By doing this, you can start to create your own social reality. It's the world that is only true within the confines of the cult. Let's take a look at the social reality of the Westboro Baptist Church. Shirley Phelps Roper, the attorney for the Westboro Baptist Church, explained that Rogers, a Presbyterian minister with a television program, had a responsibility to comment on the issue, being homosexuality. By not doing so, she explained that he was helping to promote homosexuality, which the group says falls into the category of whoremongery and adultery, which will damn the soul forever in hell. She added that the support some Americans have given to homosexuals was the reason behind tragedies including the September 11th attacks, the crash of the NASA shuttle Columbia, and the nightclub fire in Rhode Island. She also said you don't get to pretend to decide what form God takes. He's the God who could have stopped the shuttle crash, the nightclub fire, but instead he sent those things. This country has forgotten God and effectively flipped him off, and Fred Rogers is in part responsible. Regarding the September 11th attacks, Jerry Falwell, also a member of Westboro Baptist, stated, "Throwing God out successfully with the help of the federal court system, throwing God out of the public square, out of the schools. The abortionists have got to bear some burden for this because God will not be mocked. And when we destroy 40 million little innocent babies, we will make God mad." The pagans and the abortionists and the feminists and the gays and the lesbians who are actively trying to make an alternative lifestyle, the ACLU, People for the American Way, all of them who have tried to secularize America, I point the finger in their face and say, you helped this happen. The key to getting messages like these to stick is by indoctrinating the members to believe it by repeating it over and over again. Fiction, if heard frequently enough, can actually start to come to sound like fact. Next, you create an in-group bias, where you have group members conform and bond with each other. You can accomplish this by having an initiation, having them wear similar clothing, changing their names, or controlling other aspects of their day-to-day life. Then you send members out to witness. Obviously, those people outside the group are devalued, so members are sent to witness them as they are on a track to enlightenment and are superior to those on the outside of the group. Devaluing an outside reassures the member that they are good, special, deserving, and unlike those on the outside. It can also be used as a recruitment technique. Next, you begin to create cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the mental stress or discomfort experienced by an individual who holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values at the same time, or is confronted by new information that conflicts with existing beliefs, ideas, or values. For example, let's look at smoking. Obviously, having a belief that smoking is bad for you and continuing to smoke conflicts. According to cognitive dissonance theories, a person will try to resolve that conflict by doing one of two things. Either they will change their attitude to match their behavior, or change their behavior to match their beliefs. As is the case of witnessing, you may have a thought of, this organization is great, you should join us. But also have a thought of, why did I say that? I really think that joining this organization was a bad idea. Am I a liar? No, not me. I'm not a liar. Nobody forced me to say that, so why did I do it? It must be because this group is really great. And now the cognitive dissonance is resolved. Next, you create commitment by using a foot in the door technique. Studies have found that with foot in the door techniques, people are more likely to agree to something if you start with small requests. For example, Friedman and Fraser found that when they asked somebody to put a petition sign supporting safe driving in their yard versus no request, and then about 2 weeks later asked if they could put an even larger, uglier sign in the front yard, those who had signed the petition were 3 times more likely to agree to the second request. For example, Scientology uses this technique with their courses, because if they started with the high dollar courses right away, no one would ever do them. They start with a personality test that is free, and it's a true, false, maybe test to see if you need Scientology. Spoiler, everyone ends up needing Scientology. Some of the questions include, are you a slow eater? Does emotional music have quite an effect on you? Or do you often feel upset about the fate of victims and political refugees? Then the next step is to get you to take the communications course, which are several courses that involve repetitive exercises that pacify the person. Then there is regular auditing that can last an indefinite amount of time and teaches you to communicate effectively, become free from past guilt, and shed psychosomatic ills. And it keeps going from there. Then there is the new era Diagnetics, which is also an indefinite amount of time and includes auditing your life and past lives. When you finish this course, you are closer, you are in the clear, but of course you need to take the next course to make sure you are really clear. And then there are the operating Phaeton courses, which cost over $7,000. And it keeps going. Overall, Scientology is a good example of the foot in the door technique, because I am sure that if you asked someone at the beginning if they would be willing to spend $11,000 on a course, they would most likely say no. Of course, you have to establish the leader's credibility and then distract your members. You can do this through chanting, singing, meditation, or having constant group interaction. Some physical techniques of persuasion include isolating them, keeping them from sleeping, making them fast, controlling their time, taking away all privacy, having them pray all the time, complete loyalty tests, manipulate their bodies, and so on. Lastly, you fixate members on a phantom. You have them focus on something that appears to be solid, but will never happen, or will never come to be. This could include a really vague aspiration, such as a better world, or waiting for the resurrection. Let's recap with a video.
Don't you want devoted followers who leave their families for you, give their money to you, give their bodies to you, give up their lives for you, consider you God, and will kill for you?
I love you.
Don't you want to become a cult leader? Since the death of God, there's been a vacancy open. You could fill that void. Here's how. Structure your cult like an onion with the most benign and helpful features on the outside and the most controlling, kooky, and evil parts at the secret inner core. Use deception. Don't tell them who you really are. Lie. Leave out important information or distort information. Are you trying to recruit me? No. I'm just trying to share something meaningful with you. Establish front groups.
We're a Bible study group.
We're a management course. We're a meditation center.
We're a world peace organization. We're a personal development center.
We're a drug rehab center. Promise to fulfill their dreams.
Don't you want a world of unconditional love and brotherhood?
We have the secrets to self-improvement.
You can join us and be special.
Join our deep mission to save the world. We can teach you special powers, personal power,
Psychic power.
past life connection, telekinesis. Offer them something free and get them to feel obliged to give you something in return.
When we gave you that free dinner, the least you could do is come to our weekend intensive.
You can tell them time is running out and that they must make their decision now or it will be too late.
This is your only chance to make it. Don't blow it.
It's important to make this commitment now.
This is an issue of burning urgency.
Don't give them time to think. Diminish doubting commiseration by separating your new recruits from each other. Surround them with happy true believers so when in doubt they will tend to do what everyone around them is doing and believe that is normal. Start with a prolonged period of love bombing. Surround them with unconditional love and attention. Your cult family should act friendly and interested. Get information and hone their weak spots.
Tell us about yourself.
Take this personality test, and then use this information to manipulate them. Gradually over time, you'll begin to shape the recruit's behavior by granting or withholding this love and attention. After they've bonded, slowly start making your demands upon them. The message being,
Nothing in this world has value unless it relates to the leader or the ultimate purpose.
control their behavior. Come live with us.
Wear these clothes.
Eat this food. All you need is 2 hours sleep. Prescribe a rigid schedule. Keep them active and with as little sleep as possible. If you can, restrict their eating habits to low-protein food. Control their thoughts.
Our ideology answers all questions to all problems.
Let our doctrine think for you. Control their emotions. Induce guilt. The United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. People are dying of starvation.
People are dying of starvation.
You are not living up to your potential.
You are not living up to your potential.
You cheated on that test. And fear.
The enemy will electroshock you. torture you,
kill you, or carry you off to hell. Control information. Keep them from knowing all the workings of the cult. Block out any information which is critical of the group. Encourage members to spy and report on one another. Separate the recruit from himself by attacking the self and inducing a mental breakdown disguised as a spiritual awakening. When they start to freak out, have side effects, or hallucinate, tell them they are flushing out the bad stuff inside.
When I was meditating, I felt an infinite emptiness. It was utterly terrifying. No, this is good. You're transforming. Do it more. You are reaching God.
you're being reborn. You are becoming one with the universe, one with our family.
Make them paranoid about their own bodies or thought processes.
You're battling your sinful nature. Your body is detoxifying.
Tell them that there is a part of their mind they must eliminate in order to find happiness.
You must eliminate the toxic mind.
Your ego. Your ego is the source of all your problems. I don't know who I am anymore. Good. Now you're free. In fact, there was no you there to begin with.
Claim authority. It can come from a divine source.
Your Bible clearly states that I am the Messiah.
Bogus scientific research.
Scientific studies prove my techniques work.
Or special knowledge.
I am the enlightened master of the universe.
Make up stories about yourself to boost your importance.
I invented air. I have special access to the aliens.
But don't be stupid about it. Start slowly. A good con man takes a little bit of truth and a lot of lies and pulls the wool over the eyes of the ignorant. Induce trance states and self-hypnosis by practicing thought-stopping rituals and repetitive acts like dancing, spinning, singing.
We love the leader is love. When I'm not with him, I feel like a schlub. We love the leader is love. When I'm not with him, I feel like a schlub.
Over breathing. And chanting.
Step out down, 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 step out down.
Practice prolonged hours of meditation. In these trance states, they are more receptive and suggestible. Revert them back to childhood dependence and mindless obedience. Encourage separation from their family.
Your friends and family probably won't understand. Your friends and family probably won't understand.
It doesn't sound like your family and friends really love you if they can't support your new decision.
Maybe you should stay away from them. It's unhealthy for you to be around unenlightened people anyway.
If you can't recruit your friends, cut off from them.
Stop wasting time with non-believers. Stop wasting time with non-believers.
Encourage dependency and conformity, and discourage autonomy and individuality.
The whole purpose must be the focus. The self-purpose must be subordinated.
The whole purpose must be the focus. The self-purpose must be subordinated.
Have confessionals where people demonize their early lives and only praise their life in the group. Rewrite the past as terrible, even if it was great.
Before I came to emerge, I was a bad person. I was greedy, misguided, self-centered, and lost. My life is wonderful now. I hate my own life.
Before coming to emerge, I was always in my ego. My toxic mind was running my life. I was a sinful, negative loser. Thanks to the leader, every day I'm a winner.
Isolate them from the rest of the world. Make them feel part of a special elite group with an important mission.
Monuments and historical landmarks will someday be erected to commemorate us.
and our sacrifices. Tighten your group's bond by establishing scapegoats and enemies. Demonize outsiders as less than human, biased, corrupt, or conspiring against the group. Develop an us versus them mentality, fighting resistance. Tell them their critical thoughts are evidence that they have committed crimes against the group. Start investigating them and make up crimes.
I think I want to leave.
You must be insane.
Make them feel guilty.
We're doing important work here.
You expect saving the world is easy?
We're all called upon to make some sacrifices for the cause.
Just when things get tough, you want to give up.
You're weak.
Do you want to move forward toward freedom and enlightenment? Or do you want to fall back into your old dirty ways?
What's more important, our mission,
Our family?
eternal salvation?
Or your petty grievances?
You're being negative,
Ignorant
selfish.
and sinful.
Our leader is flawless.
The doctrine is flawless.
There must be something wrong with you.
There must be something wrong with you. There must be something wrong with you. There must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is.
Indoctrinate with fear. Tell them that they could be possessed by evil spirits, or suggest that if they should ever leave, something bad could happen to them.
I'm just warning you that without us, you're liable to get into a bad accident, get sick, or even die.
I'm warning you. Without us, you're likely to get into a bad accident, get sick, or even die.
If you leave, you'll just be reincarnated into a lower life form.
Make it easier for them to die for you by calling their bodies containers that are shed before they evolve into higher life forms. It's that simple. Now, don't you want to become a cult leader? Don't you want devoted followers who leave their families for you, give their money to you, give their bodies to you, give up their lives for you, and will kill for you?
I will do what you say for the cause. I will leave my family for the cause. I will give you my money for the cause. I will give you my body for the cause. I will die for the cause. I will kill for the cause. I love you.
So let's talk about some of the warning signs for a cult. If the group is focused on a living leader to whom members seem to display zealous, unquestioning loyalty, if the group is preoccupied with bringing in new members or with bringing in money, if their questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished, if they use mind-numbing techniques like chanting or speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions are used to suppress doubts about the group or its leadership. The leadership dictates in great detail how members should think, feel, or act, or give permission for things. If the group is elitist, claiming a special exalted status, the leader is considered the Messiah. If there's extra biblical revelation, like God communicates directly to the group's leader, the group exhibits a polarized us versus them mentality. Outsiders are evil and must be shunned. The group's leader is not accountable to any authorities, inside or outside of the group. The group teaches that its ends justify the means. The leadership induces guilt, fear, in group members in order to control them. Members' subservience to the group causes them to cut ties with family and friends and to give up personal goals in the interests of the group. And social encapsulation. Members are encouraged to live with or socialize with the group exclusively.